families, and I know that's odd, but that's your heritage. Freedom is never free. Okay, in saying that, we are going to jump right into this real quick. This isn't going to be more of a preaching, going to be more of a teaching. Let me tell you how I came about this. A couple weeks ago, maybe about 3 weeks ago, somebody asked me a question about the Bible and had a difference in opinion that I have. And then it was just shortly after that, Brother Doug says, "Oh, Rob, you're going to be preaching on Memorial Day." And a couple days later, he says, "Okay," he says, "I usually don't tell you what to preach, but how would you like to stay in Timothy?" Because that's what he's in. Timothy, trusting Timothy. And I said, "Absolutely." A couple days later, he goes, "Nah, I don't want you to do that." So I said, "Okay." So he goes, "Just do whatever." And I said, "Okay." So I started praying about it, and it's funny because last week he says, "Rob, you have any idea what you're going to preach about?" And I said, "Well, yeah, kinda. I've really been back and forth over some things, but I keep going back to this one thing." And I said, "I think I'm going to preach about the 10 plagues." And he's like, "Which one?" "All 10. He said, "In one sermon?" I was like, "All 10. And I said, this is what I said, I told him, I said, "Or we can do this, Brother Doug." I said, "You can give me 10 weeks and I'll go one plague per week." He said, "Nah." I said, 2 weeks, I'll go 5 plagues in 2 weeks, And he's like, "That's a lot, Rob." And I said, "Yeah," I said, "it is, but I cannot shake this." Well, in hearing what he said, this is a lot. It's a ton. And I have last couple of days been back and forth, and I'm just like, all right, I'm going to talk about this, I'm going to talk about that, I'm going to talk about this, I'm going to talk about that. And I'm reading these scriptures, and God just keeps bringing me back to this. So this might not be for anybody in here, but I hope it is. So a few weeks ago, somebody asked me, somebody said something about religion is this is crazy. It is a complex system of a polytheistic religion, okay? What that means is they worshipped many, many gods. It's funny because in all the researches I looked, some people said there was more than 80. Some people said there was hundreds, maybe thousands of gods that they worship. And everything had a god. And their gods wasn't just something that, it was, their God made everything work. Their gods made everything from the rivers. It blessed the rivers. It blessed the crops. They had a God for everything. So many gods that they actually prayed to for different things. So this wasn't, to be an Egyptian, it wasn't just something that was out there. You knew who all these gods were. All right? They were huge. You were raised growing up believing all this. Now, again, there's just so much in the plague. If you go back and do a study of Moses, it'll blow your mind. Moses was raised an Egyptian. He knew these gods. He worshiped these gods. It's crazy. Boom. I want you guys to go back and dive into Exodus when you leave here because, again, I'm just barely going to skim over everything. He worshiped these gods. He knew what God was for what. That was not by a coincidence. Moses spent 40 years studying these gods, being an Egyptian. Then he spent 40 years after and the cool thing is, I'm backing up again. The cool thing is if you remember, his mom raised him as the nanny, but she was teaching him about the one true God also. So he knew all of the gods. He knew about everything. He was an educated man. He was a prince of Egypt. He was so educated. And then he, we know that he committed murder. He even hid the body, buried it. And then, of course, got found out, got seen, fled, and he spent 40 years in the desert. Again, not by coincidence. His father-in-law was a pastor. Boom. This is crazy. This is crazy. Then he spent another about a year going back and talking to Pharaoh about letting God's people go. You got to realize this just didn't happen in a week. Most Bible scholars believe that it started around June, and Pharaoh finally let the people go in April. About a year. These plagues took about a year. And that is huge if you're actually going to study and know exactly what they are. Okay, real quick. The first plague, I don't have scriptures for this, so we're going to let that stay up there. That's the only one I don't have the scriptures on the board for. But the first plague, when Moses, just kind of if you don't know the story, again, Moses spent 40 years, and God called Moses to be the Hebrew, the children. They were in bondage for 300 years. Okay? Now here's the crazy thing. Again, you dive in the back of Exodus, you dive in the first of Exodus, you find out that the Hebrew people even started worshiping their gods. That was their culture. That's where they lived. That's what they lived in. And that's another key point here in just a minute, okay? So they weren't innocent. They were in bondage for 300 years for a reason. For a reason. They were worshiping other gods, not just the true one and only God. So they were crying out to God, and God heard them. Said, please send us a Savior. And he heard them, and he called Moses, which again, not a coincidence, knew everything about Egypt, knew everything about the desert that they're going to spend 40 years walking around in, knew everything about their gods, knew everything about the God. Not a coincidence. I'm going to keep saying that today. Not a coincidence. All right? So the very first plague that happened, Moses goes to Pharaoh and says, let my people go. God said, let my people go. And Pharaoh said, no, they're my slaves. How am I going to get stuff built? And he said, well, if you don't, these things are going to happen to you. This is the one and true God. And so the first thing that happened was in Exodus 7, 14 through 25, is Moses, through Aaron, because Moses didn't like to talk, Moses through Aaron told Pharaoh to let my people go, or the water would be turned to blood. The Nile would be turned to blood. Now here's the crazy thing. Again, I'm not reading 7, 14 through 25. We'd be here all day long. I'd be reading all of Exodus because it is amazing. It is a long process that took, like I said, a year. And it was 80 years in the making. You guys get that? 80 years in the making for this. All right, I'm going to jump down to 7 and 20. And it says, Moses and Aaron did as the Lord commanded. In the sight of Pharaoh and in the sight of the servants, he lifted his staff and struck the water. And the Nile, struck the waters of the Nile. And all of the waters in the Nile turned to blood. And all of the fish died. And the Nile stank. I love that. It stank. And the Egyptians could not drink the water from the Nile. There was blood throughout the land of Egypt. Now, do you guys hear that? Throughout the land of Egypt. That means the Egyptians had to go through, not the Egyptians, the Hebrew children had to go through this. Throughout the land of Egypt means even the Hebrew children, they couldn't drink the water. Now, why is that a big deal? Why is that a big, oh, I do have that up there. Why is that a big deal? It's a big deal because of this. All right, this next picture, skip to the next one here. This is the God. Now I'm going to rip these names. Go ahead and yeah, right here. These pictures actually were off of Egyptian hieroglyphics. They were taken off walls and then put color on them. And I just think they're amazing. So this was the goddess, and I'm going to rip these names apart, Hapi. This was the goddess Hapi, and I'm sorry if you speak Egyptian. I apologize. This is the goddess Hapi. Okay, she is a twin deity. That means a twin god. Her and a twin sister were a set of gods, a pair of gods, and this is one of the gods goddesses that the Egyptians prayed to, and she was the spirit god of the upper and lower Nile. Now, do y'all hear what I'm saying? She was the spirit god of the upper and lower Nile. What that means is simply this, that God should not have been able to turn the waters red because there was a greater God that had nothing else to do in this world but to take care of the Nile River, to take care of the drinking water, to take care of the Egyptians. So the Egyptians would have prayed and said, Goddess Hapi, what are you doing? Why are you letting this Hebrew God do this? But I love this because the magicians told Pharaoh that's not a big deal. So they conjured their little magic stuff and turned a little bucket into red, and it didn't impress Pharaoh. Did not impress Pharaoh because the magicians could do kind of the same thing, but not in this. But guess what? They couldn't stop it. So the Egyptians would have prayed to this God, and this God would not have listened. That is not a coincidence, guys. It's not a coincidence. Now, I'm going to talk about 10 different gods. These 10 different gods are the top gods. These aren't the little guys. These are the top gods that they sacrificed to, that they paid homage to. These are the top gods. These gods should have taken care of the God of Israel like that. A little bit of water, turned to red, change it back. But I believe for 7 days, they couldn't get it. 7 days? 7 days of no water. 7 days of stinky, nasty river. Their God couldn't turn it back. So, Pharaoh said, no big deal. I'm not going to let my people go. The second plague. I love this. Now, the second plague, let's jump into this real quick. Let's see, I'm going to read, it's Exodus, of course, Exodus 1 through 15, but I'm going to read verse 6, 8, and 12, okay? 6, 8, and 12. Let's see here. So Aaron stretched out his hand over the waters of Egypt, and the frogs came up and covered the land of Egypt. Okay, let's skip to 8. And Pharaoh called Moses and Aaron and pleaded with the Lord to take away, the frogs, pleaded with them, take away the frogs from me and from my people, and I will let the people go. Now let's skip down to 12. So basically, here's what happened. What happened was, Aaron, Moses, please, these frogs are killing us. They're everywhere. It's a pain. It's uncomfortable. They're jumping in my bed. I don't like it. All right, I'm tired of being uncomfortable. Aaron, Moses, get rid of them, and I'll let the people go. They said, okay. But here's what happened. So Moses stretches out his staff. The frogs all died. They died. So they're not jumping around no more, but they died. Nasty, okay? All right? So they swept them in big piles. But here's what happened in 12. So Moses and Aaron went out from Pharaoh. Moses cried out to the Lord about the frogs, and he agreed with Pharaoh. And the Lord did according to the word of Moses, and the frogs all died in the houses and the courtyards and the fields. But then Pharaoh said, nah, I've changed my mind. I'm not going to let the people go. Now, here's the crazy thing. The god Haget. Let's look at this next picture. The goddess Haget. This was their god. Frogs were sacred. It is not a mistake that it was the frogs that came out. Frogs, alligators, all this. Now, here's the thing. It's crazy. A lot of people who says it's all natural said, well, they came out of the water because the water turned red from the volcano that spilled. Just so happens that the alligators came out of the water. The fish died. Everything died. But just so happened that they worshipped frogs. This is so cool. In my research, I looked. If you killed a frog in Egypt, you could have been killed yourself. They were that sacred. Now listen, I want you to see how big this is. If you killed a frog, you could have been put to death. The God of Israel caused frogs to be everywhere. Even the Hebrew children had to go through this. Caused frogs everywhere. Pharaoh says, get rid of them. What happened to them? They died. Their sacred frogs died. They prayed to Haget and said, please quit, stop. No, she couldn't do anything. She didn't do anything. Nothing. They're God. 2 times in a row. But our God, the God of Israel, said, okay, frogs died. Again, this is huge to Egyptians. The frogs died. They had to pile them up and they stank. See the theme here? The river stank, dead fish. The frogs died. They stank. To the Egyptians, it didn't like to us. Frog died. No big deal. No big. Woke out yesterday. Walked out my door yesterday and a big old turtle on my porch. Felt sorry for the big guy, so I took him across the field. But if I was an Egyptian and a frog was on my porch, I'd have frogs in my yard, and I wish God would make them all die. Frogs poop really big. For a year when we first moved in there, I was like, "What is this on my porch?" Got this big old giant frog sits there, and whatever. So I'm not an Egyptian. I don't hold them up. This was huge to them. If an Egyptian would have walked out and there had been a frog there, that would have been good luck all day long. A dead frog was there, something bad's going to happen. They got dead frogs everywhere. Y'all see how big that is? Okay, what are you getting at, Rob? Third plague. I love this. Now, the second plague, let's jump into this real quick. Let's see, I'm going to read, it's Exodus, of course, Exodus 1 through 15, but I'm going to read verse 6, 8, and 12, okay? 6, 8, and 12. Let's see here. So Aaron stretched out his hand over the waters of Egypt, and the frogs came up and covered the land of Egypt. Okay, let's skip to 8. And Pharaoh called Moses and Aaron and pleaded with the Lord to take away the frogs, pleaded with them, take away the frogs from me and from my people, and I will let the people go. Now let's skip down to 12. So basically, here's what happened. What happened was, Aaron, Moses, please, these frogs are killing us. They're everywhere. It's a pain. It's uncomfortable. They're jumping in my bed. I don't like it. All right, I'm tired of being uncomfortable. Aaron, Moses, get rid of them, and I'll let the people go. They said, okay. But here's what happened. So Moses stretches out his staff. The frogs all died. They died. So they're not jumping around no more. But they died. Nasty. Okay? All right? So they swept them in big piles. But here's what happened in 12. So Moses and Aaron went out from Pharaoh. Moses cried out to the Lord about the frogs, and he agreed with Pharaoh. And the Lord did according to the word of Moses, and the frogs all died in the houses and the courtyards and the fields. But then Pharaoh said, nah, I've changed my mind. I'm not going to let the people go. Now, here's the crazy thing. The god Haget. Let's look at this next picture. The goddess Haget. This was their god. Frogs were sacred. It is not a mistake that it was the frogs that came out. Frogs, alligators, all this. Now, here's the thing. It's crazy. A lot of people who says it's all natural said, well, they came out of the water because the water turned red from the volcano that spilled. Just so happens that the alligators came out of the water. The fish died. Everything died. But just so happened that they worshipped frogs. This is so cool. In my research, I looked. If you killed a frog in Egypt, you could have been killed yourself. They were that sacred. Now listen, I want you to see how big this is. if you killed a frog, you could have been put to death. The God of Israel caused frogs to be everywhere. Even the Hebrew children had to go through this. Caused frogs everywhere. Pharaoh says, get rid of them. What happened to them? They died. Their sacred frogs died. They prayed to Haggit and said, please quit, stop. No, she couldn't do anything. She didn't do anything. Nothing. They're God. 2 times in a row. But our God, the God of Israel, said, okay, frogs died. Again, this is huge to Egyptians. The frogs died. They had to pile them up and they stank. See the theme here? The river stank, dead fish. The frogs died. They stank. To the Egyptians, it didn't like to us. Frog died. No big deal. No big deal. Walked out yesterday. Walked out my door yesterday and a big old turtle on my porch. Felt sorry for the big guy, so I took him across the field. But if I was an Egyptian and a frog was on my porch, I'd have frogs in my yard, and I wish God would make them all die. Frogs poop really big. For a year when we first moved in there, I was like, "What is this on my porch?" Got this big old giant frog sits there, and whatever. So I'm not an Egyptian. I don't hold them up. This was huge to them. If an Egyptian would have walked out and there had been a frog there, that would have been good luck all day long. A dead frog was there, something bad's going to happen. They got dead frogs everywhere. Y'all see how big that is? Okay, what are you getting at, Rob? Third plague. Lice and gnats. Whoa. Okay, here we go. This is going to be in Exodus 8, 16 through 19. I'm just going to read verse 17. Verse 17, here we go. And they did, so Aaron stretched out his hand with his staff and struck the dust of the earth. And there were gnats on all man and beast. All the dust of the earth became gnats in all of the land of Egypt. Okay, let's look at this next god. I love this. Gib. This is Gib. I just think it's funny because lice, everybody's, gnats, lice, and stuff like that's all over birds. He's got a bird on his head. Gib is the god of the earth. And the lice were made from the dust of the earth. Now, you got to even go back further than that. What were we created from? The dust of the earth. We are created from the dust. There's a god of the earth, which is the god Gib that they prayed to. So, again, the God of Israel said, stretch out the staff, hit the dust. All the dust turned to gnats, turned to lice. Now, these 3 plagues here just made them uncomfortable. All the gnats, all the lice, their God, over the God of the earth, could not change the dust of the earth back to dust. Only the God of Israel could do that. Again, these 3 plagues were just to make them uncomfortable. This is how God works. I want you guys to see the picture. A lot of things that goes on in your life when you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing makes you uncomfortable. This is God warning you. God is a graceful God, and we're going to get to that in a minute. This made them very uncomfortable. And their God, Gib, I just love these names. Gib could not turn the dust of the earth back into dust. God is mocking their gods, and they knew it. But here's where it kind of takes a step up in the 4th plague. Takes a step up in a couple different things. Okay, Exodus 8, 20 through 32, and we're going to go to 22 here. Exodus 8, 22. But on that day, I will set apart the land of Gisham, where my people dwell, so that the swarms of flies shall not be there, that you may know that I am the Lord in the midst of the earth. So, catch this. Okay. So now they're talking to Pharaoh, and he says, okay, just so you know that it's not just a freak of nature, and this will blow my friend that talked to me out of the water. This is what they can't explain. Now all of a sudden, Gisham is what they call the little community, the little place where the Hebrew children lived. Okay, it's still there in Egypt. But now all the rest of the plagues, all but the last one, of course, all the rest of the plagues did not affect the Hebrew children. So Pharaoh knew this was not a coincidence. This was not a volcano that erupted somewhere, that caused the red, that caused the frogs to come out, that caused them to die, that caused the gnats and the lice to come from the dead smelling fish and the dead smelling frogs. This is not just a freak of nature. This is the real deal. I am the one and true God. Your little gods are nothing. This was the game changer. So, here is this next. I love this. This is my hardest one to say. Kapari, I believe. Now, this is really cool because you have to do a lot of studying. A lot of Bibles say that it was flies. Okay, flies. I love this. This is Kapari. He's a beetle-headed god who moved the sun. He was a dung beetle. I'm not lying. That's what they are over there in Egypt. They're dung beetles. They move dung. So they have a god with a dung beetle head, because this god was the one they believe moved the sun through the sky. A dung beetle moved the sun. I just think that's amazing. Well, now here's the crazy thing. So if you go back and look at the translations of flies and dung beetles in the Egyptian language, they're really close. So this is what most scholars believe the flies were dung beetles. If you watch any Egyptian movie like The Mummy or anything like that, all them little beetles that come out that kill everybody, they're dung beetles. They eat poop. That's what they do. They have a god with a poop bug head. I'm just telling you. Yeah, so this is crazy. This is the first plague that brings destruction. These dung beetles destroy everything. Wood. Everything in your house. If they are covered, these beetles, if you do the research on these they're like saws, man. So they destroy. Now here's the crazy thing. Again, I'm going to back up. Hebrew children didn't have to go through this. They're sitting over there in their nice little huts with no dung beetles running around. But the Egyptians were invaded by flies. And here's the crazy, again, if either way, well, Brother Rob, my Bible says flies. That's okay. Flies are just as bad because they bite and burrow in your skin. My buddy said, well, if I know where the flies came from, they came from the dead frogs. There were so many dead frogs that just naturally died. And the flies came out of the dead frogs, and that's why the flies were there. Might be what God did, but all I know is the Bible says that these guys, flies, dung beetles, a very irritating insect, ate everything up on the Egyptian side, and only on the Egyptian side. You know these Egyptians are praying, begging their gods, come stop this. You've got a head like one of these. You are the God over these beetles, over these flies. Put a stop to it. I would have loved to have been a fly on the wall. Okay. I would have loved to have been a fly on the wall and heard the Egyptians crying out to this God that did nothing for them. Nothing. Zero, nothing. Pharaoh still said, nope, not going to let the people go. So we're going to take it a little bit deeper, and we're going to go to the fifth plague. The fifth plague, which you find in Exodus 9, 1 through 7, and I'm going to read 6. Turn my page here, my Bible. I'm going to read 6, and it says, are you guys following me at all? Y'all getting this? I mean, this is kind of a teaching thing, but it's huge. And don't believe me, go home and research all this, okay? Research these gods. Really? Yeah. Use this right here. Use this, because I'm going to give you scriptures here in just a minute that says God did it to mock their gods. So I'm not making this up. I'm just telling you, if you don't know this, you're skimming through the Bible. Quit skimming and dive. Quit skimming and dive. Okay, where was I at? I have no clue. All right. 6, verse 6. Where's 6? There's 6. I think I'm going to read 5 and 6. Yeah, I'm going to read 5 and 6. And the Lord set a time, saying, tomorrow the Lord will do this thing in the land. And the next day the Lord did this thing. All of the livestock of the Egyptians died, but not one of the livestock of the people of Israel died. Now here's the crazy thing. Livestock were sacred also. Animals, they were sacred. Now I love this. When I did research on this God, let's pull this guy up. There he is. Hathor, or Hathor. Hathor was the main god of all the cattle, all the livestock. But not only that, I love this, because when I pulled Hathor up, he was the main god in a list of numerous gods. There's Amon, there's Bat, there's Apis. I'm not even going to try to pronounce that one. That would turn out bad. There's Manus, there's Paeth. There's so many different gods that they would have been praying to, because guess what? Their meat is dying. The cattle, the sacred cow, what they ate. We went from being irritated, now all of a sudden, dung beetles are tearing everything up, and now, guess what? Our cattle's dying, we're going to get hungry. God has turned it up a notch. But wait, let's look over at the Hebrew children. Their cattle is still okay. You know these Egyptians are crying out to Hathor and saying, what's going on? You're the god of cattle. Do something about this. These are gods they have prayed to and learned about since they were children. It amazes me. But here's the thing. So this next one, I love this. This is, I'm sorry. I apologize. I'm going to back up. I'm not going to read this, but God had grace on the Egyptians here. When Moses went into, God told Moses, when he went in to talk to Pharaoh, he told Pharaoh, he said, here's the deal. If you're not going to let my people go, I'm still going to give you grace. If any of your Egyptian people have turned a deaf ear on their gods and said they want to believe me, they want to believe in me, tell them to go in their house and take their livestock in there with them. So if any of the Egyptians believed the true God, they took their livestock in the house and God saved that livestock. Is that crazy? God gave them grace even after what they did, and they keep praying to their gods. God said, I still love the people. I hate this is happening to them. So anything left outside tomorrow is going to die. And that's what happened. But I want to point that out. I even wrote a note down when I was reading the word. I was like, God gave them grace. The Egyptians that are beating his children, he still gave them grace. Okay, now this is crazy. All right, we're going to go to the next one. The boils. The boils, the sixth plague. We're almost done here. The sixth plague. The boils. Let's see here. Exodus 9, 8 through 12, as you see up there. I'm going to read 10 and 11. I love this. This is cool. Let's see here. 10 and 11. So they took suet from a kiln and stood before Pharaoh. And Moses threw it in the air, and it became boils, breaking out into sores on man and beast. And the magicians could not stand before Moses because of the boils. The boils came upon the magicians. This is huge. This is why this is huge. The magicians weren't just magicians. If you go back and look into the Egypt culture, they were their priests. Their priests had to, go check me on this, they had to shave their heads and every hair in their body so that they could not have any lice on their body, so that they could not have any imperfection on their body. Their priests, their magicians had to be perfect to enter their sacred houses and also to enter in front of Pharaoh. Because we're going to get into this in a minute, but Pharaoh was also a god to them. So they're priests. That's why the Bible specifically says the boils attacked the priests. They were unclean now. Up to this point, they could have wiped the lice off. But up to this point, the priests, which were gods, held very high. Now all of a sudden the Egyptian people are seeing their priests, their magicians, walking around with boils on them. Wait, they're supposed to be perfect. This was huge. Pharaoh could no longer call for his magicians or his priests to ask advice. Now he's all on his own. Isn't that crazy? Now look at this God right here. I love this. This is Isis. We've heard that name before, haven't we? Isis. The goddess of medicine and peace. That's not what it means now. It's not when you hear Isis, you don't think peace, right? This is Isis, the goddess of medicine and peace. Their own priests couldn't be healed. This goddess let them down. You think it's a coincidence that God did this? You think it's a natural phenomenon that this just happened? I don't think so. I don't think so. They prayed to this God and she let them down. The seventh plague is the hail. The hail. Exodus 9:13 through 35. I'm going to read 19 and 20. Let me find it right here. 19 and 20. Exodus 9, 19 and 20. I might have wrote something down here. Wrong. Let's see here. Where am I at? I have no clue. You guys like it when this happens? I love it. Now, therefore, send. So get your livestock out. Okay, here we go. Actually, I'm sorry. It is not 19 and 20, so disregard what it says up there. It says, and the Lord Moses stretched out his hand toward his 22, the heavens, and there may hail, and said, there may hail fall upon the Egyptians, no man or beast, every plant in the field and in the land. And then Moses stretched out his hand toward the heavens, and the Lord sent a thunder of hail, and it rained down on the earth. Now here's the crazy thing about this, okay? This is nut. Look at this next one here. This is nut. Go ahead and hit that next one there. This is the goddess nut. Hit my next slide, maybe. Is it messed up? All right, the goddess nut. The goddess nut. So that's, yes, there we go. I love this. The goddess nut, all right, is the goddess of the sky. This is crazy because if you look, it's art. She's arched, okay? All right? All right. So basically she is protecting anybody under her, which would be the Egyptians. So she should be able to protect the Egyptians from the hail. But she did not. She did not. The hail destroyed. Now again, this in the season this was, they had flaxseed up, okay? And barley. So the hail destroyed the flaxseed and the barley in the fields, which was what was out in the fields right now. That made clothing, and also it fermented their drinks. So the hail, God's already destroyed their meat, right? He's destroyed their meat. Now he's destroying the crops that they make clothing and the ferment for their drinks. So make it a little nicer. The goddess Nut could not, the goddess of the sky, could not stop the hail from falling down. Okay, the next one is going to be the locust plague. Okay, this is 10:1 through 20. 10:1 through 20, and I'm going to read verse 12 here. Let's hope I got the right verse this time. Then the Lord said to Moses, stretch out your hand over the land of Egypt, and for the locusts, so that they may come upon the land of Egypt, and eat every plant in the land, all of the hail left. So these are the plants now that they made bread out of. So they've been living on bread because all of their cattle's dead. That make sense? The hail destroyed the crops. Remember, there's a couple months now. New crops come up. Now these crops are the crops that they make the bread out of, and then God sent the locusts through the land to eat all of the crops. And now they're out of food, bread, and meat. They have nothing to put in their drinks. They are very, very, very uncomfortable and hurting. They're very uncomfortable and hurting. This is another one I can't say. Orisis. Okay? This is the god of the underworld. This god, they believe, created growth, vegetation, and crops. Huge god. This is one of the gods in the underworld that created the growth from the underworld. That's what they believe. They would grow up. They would pray to this god so that this god would cause good crops. But this god could not stop the locusts from destroying the crops. Does that make sense? Is that crazy? Again, I know you're probably bored to death. I know. I think it's fascinating. God attacked their gods to show them that he was God. Does that make sense? I just think it's amazing. All right, we're almost done. All right, ninth plague. Here we go. This is huge right here. This is big. We're going to go Exodus 21 through 29. I'm going to read 22 and 23. It says, Moses stretched out his hand toward the heavens, and there was pitch darkness in all of the land of Egypt for 3 days. They did not see one another, nor did anyone rise from his place for 3 days, but all the people of Israel had light where they lived. Hello? Did you know the people of Israel are going, why is it so dark over there? But here's the crazy thing. The people of Egypt couldn't see the light over there. They couldn't see the light that the Israelites had in many ways, because God is the light. It's not a coincidence. Pitch black. And I'm thinking, well, didn't they have candles? Probably couldn't see the candles to find them. Have you ever been somewhere where it's so pitch black? All I know is the Bible says for 3 days they didn't leave. They didn't get up. Now, I want you guys to understand this. They have no food. They have no meat. They have no bread. It stinks. They've had a year of, I can just imagine that when the frogs are finally, the stink's going away, then all of a sudden these dung beetles come in and the stinks. Well, then when that finally goes away, the cattle dies. It stinks. They are living around a sewage. Look at this God right here. You guys might recognize him. This is the God of Ra. All right? This is Ra. This is the sun god. This is one of the big gods. If you watch anything in Egyptian stuff, you hear about Ra. This is the sun god. The sun god. What just happened? This is the sun and moon god. Okay? Ra was actually the father of, he's the father of gods. This is the father of gods in Egyptians' culture. I'm going to get this. They believed that Pharaoh was actually one of his sons. He's the sun and moon god. He's the big god. He's the big kahuna. He's the one. He can't make the sun shine nor the moon shine. Because the God of Israel, the true God that created the sun and the moon, just basically told them, don't shine. Oh, wait. Shine over here on the Hebrew people. My children. That's crazy, guys. Don't you know that for 3 days, pitch black? Have you ever sat there in silence for a minute? A minute takes forever. When the electricity goes out, somebody jumps up to find a flashlight. I mean, immediately. I mean, you might even know that the electricity is going to come back on. But it's like, where's those lights? Where's those lights? Got to have the lights. Can you imagine for 3 days being so pitch black? Praying to your God, Ra. Imhotep Ra is his name. Praying to Imhotep Ra. God, brighten the sun. He is the sun God. I don't think it's a coincidence, guys. He has no power. This next one is kind of a double whammy. This is the 10th plague, and I'm finishing up here, guys. The 10th plague. We all know this is the death plague, the death of the firstborn. I'm just going to read verse 29 here. 11 and 29. I can't read 11 and 29. I'm sorry, 12 and 29. I apologize. Because there is no 29 and 11. Told you, check me. Brother Rob said, Exodus chapter 11, verse 29 is one of his favorite in the Bible. Okay. It's not there. Okay. Sorry. 29. It says, at midnight the Lord struck down all the firstborn of the land of Egypt. From the firstborn to Pharaoh, who sat on the throne, to the firstborn of the captive, who was in the dungeon. Even the firstborn of the livestock. Now, guys, this is a different plague. So far, the Hebrew children's been sitting back watching everything after the third plague. They had to endure the third plague. They finally cried out to God, and then now they're just sitting back laughing at the Egyptians. But this is where the rubber hit the road. Because God told his people, you don't just get to sit back and watch me by faith anymore. Now it's going to take a little bit of work. Faith without works is dead. You're going to have to get out, and you're going to have to make a sacrifice, and you're going to have to take that blood, and you're going to have to put it over the lamppost. You're going to have to do something. Basically, if you're lazy and you're not willing to get up and do something for God, this plague is going to hit you. Your firstborn is going to die. Now, this is huge. Look at this next picture right here. This next one is Anubis. We've all seen this. This is the god of the underworld, the god of life and death. Couldn't do anything. Not only did God laugh in his face, Ra's son, which the pharaohs were born human, but they believed that they were the sons of Ra, Imhotep Ra, the main god. His firstborn died. Pharaoh's firstborn died. Every Egyptian's firstborn died. Even the cattle. You talk about throwing sand, dirt in the face of the gods. Our God said, you want to believe in them gods? This is what you get. I have given you opportunity after opportunity after opportunity. I didn't want it to come to this. I even gave you a grace period saying, hey, pull your cattle in, they won't die. Pull a cow in, you'll have meat. He slammed him in the face. He slammed Egypt in the face. And guys, he's screaming at us right now. Anubis, the god of life and death, could not stop this from happening. Don't you know Pharaoh was still holding on to that? Don't you know Pharaoh didn't think that his own son would die? But when he did die, don't you know, it tore Pharaoh, tore the Egyptians apart. We know it did because guess what happened? He let the people go. God did not want it to come to this. 10 times, God gave them an opportunity. 10 times, God said, I don't want it to go any further. Let my people go. I want them out of bondage. 10 times. And here's my question to you. I got 3 more scriptures here. And here's my question to you. What gods do you have in your life? I don't believe those were coincidences. I believe this is in the Bible, and if you do your research, you realize those 10 plagues didn't just happen. They weren't just, God said, I'm going to send some frogs. I'm going to send some pestilence. I'm going to send... No, they were for a specific reason that attacked a specific God. Don't laugh at me. A specific God. This is Wednesday, every Wednesday night. They laugh at me. I love it. So, a specific God in their life. If you're wondering why some things are happening to you, if you're wondering why you had to go through certain things in your life, if you're wondering why maybe you're going through something right now in your life, maybe it's because God over and over and over again has told you, get the gods out of your life and put me first. Because the Bible tells us that Jesus, matter of fact, I've got it right here. Am I going to skip? No, I didn't write it down. I'm sorry, not yet. The Word tells us that Jesus is the same yesterday, today, and tomorrow. Forever. The Word tells us that God's the same. He didn't like gods in their life. He sent plagues. He doesn't like gods in our life. He's not number 2. He's number 1. Have you ever wondered why I had to go through this? Why I had to go through that? What is your God? Well, let's just define a God. Anything that is more important or you put in front of God Himself. Whatever you spend more time with than God, you're putting in front of God. Does that make sense? I'm going to throw some names out there, and I'm the world's worst. Let's throw sports. Let's throw video games. Let's throw boyfriend, girlfriend. Let's throw family. I can't put my family before God? No. You put God before your family, and your family will turn to God. It doesn't matter what it is. And I know I just threw a couple things out there, and a couple of you are sitting there going, oh man, you had to throw that out there. Doesn't matter what you're doing. If it's more important than God Himself, well, it's not. How often do you read this? Do you watch TV more than you read this? Do you watch TV instead of reading this? Then the TV is more important than God. Then the trips are more important than God. Then the fishing's more important than God. Whatever it is, I'm not trying to nail you guys. God gave them 10 chances. 10 smaller plagues before He finally caused death. Before He finally caused the big plague. How many plagues in your life are you overlooking? God is trying to get me to stop doing that. How much longer are you going to have before finally God says, I'm done with you? You ever look over on the other side and go, wow, they are so blessed. I wish I was blessed like them. Maybe that's the Hebrew children. Maybe you're in the Egyptian side. Oh, no, don't say that. I'm just saying, guys. If you're looking on the other side and the grass is greener, maybe it's your fault the grass isn't green where you're at because you're not giving everything to God. I don't believe they were coincidences. I believe they were put there for us to study and to learn and to know that God is serious. Does he still think that way? Here we go. Let's look at Matthew 12 and 30. It says, whosoever is not with me is against me. Whosoever does not gather scatters. If you're not with God, if you're not 100% on fire for God, if you're not giving God everything, you are against him. Matthew 22:37 says, and he said to him, you shall love the Lord God with all of your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind. Revelations 3:15. This is huge right here, guys. I know your works. You are neither hot nor cold. I would rather you be hot or cold. So because you are lukewarm, neither hot nor cold, I will spew you out of my mouth. I will spit you out of my mouth. You are vomit coming out of my mouth. I say this verse probably up here more than any other verses because it's so serious. What does lukewarm mean? Lukewarm means you're putting something else before God. Another God. Don't tell me I believe in other gods. I'm telling you there's other gods. I'm telling you there's gods all around us. The Bible says there's other gods. That's why he did this. It's not unchristian-like to say there's other gods. But there's one true God. We make anything a God in our life. We can make anything a God in our life. What are you making God of your life? Is he going to have to do to you what he did to the Egyptians? Because I know he doesn't want to. He didn't want to do it to them. How many times has he given you the grace of going, okay, pull the cattle in the house and I'll let you eat? How many times has he given you the grace of saying, okay, I know your heart, I know you love me, but quit doing it. Guys, I am not going to lie and stand up here and say I know what your God is. Because I don't. But you do. The whole point of this today is for you to take a look at your life and go, what is my God? What do I put above anything else? What would hurt me if I couldn't have or do for the next 7 days, like the Egyptians did, the next 3 days, for the next year? What do you put before God? Don't make God bring plagues down on you. Oh, he won't do that. God is the same yesterday, today, and forever. He will do that because he loves you. Because if you put other gods in your life, you're destroying your life. And he doesn't want to see that. He doesn't want to see you burn in hell. He wants to see you in heaven. He wants you. You know, the word tells us that I am the way, the truth, and the life. No other way to get to heaven except for through me, the true God, the one God, the God of Israel, the God of America, the God that your ancestors, that your family fought for and died for, that we honor on Memorial Day. Are we spitting in God's face? Are we turning our back to God? Go ahead and come up, guys, the praise and worship team.